Today I'm joined by none other than Jack Murphy. Jack Murphy is a writer, a podcaster, host of the Jack Murphy Live Show, a sort of a Joe Rogan of the Deplorables, on his way to becoming the Joe Rogan of the future, and also founder of the Liminal Order and author of Democrat to Deplorable. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on. I've been following your podcast for a long time. I'm a devout listener. You have some amazing
Oh,
guests on.
thank you.
Yeah, I love the Millerman podcast. I'm obsessed with Millerman now, and so that's kind of my direction. Listen to all of them, and yeah, can recommend his podcast as well. But obviously,
Definitely.
yeah, listen to the Jack Murphy Live Show. It's excellent stuff. I wanted to ask you, do you recommend getting canceled? Because you have quite a deep cancellation story.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Like cancellation for me has turned out to be a very liberating experience. It really threw me out into the wilderness. It took away my ability to earn. It took away the reputation I had built up over 40 some years. And it put me in a sink or swim situation, which is funny because I remember writing I remember very clearly writing on my blog in like 2015 or 2016 that I was all in, man. I was Cortez burning my ships, swimming out from the shore with no regard for the return trip. But I didn't actually know what that felt like until I got canceled. And so, necessity, I guess, is the mother of all invention. And it was just, I had to do it. And the only way to really recover from the cancellation was to take the energy and turn it around and ride it in a positive way. Do I recommend it to everybody? No, it's horrible. Your family suffers, your children suffers. It's hard on your physicality. It's hard on your emotions. It's hard on everything. It's a sudden, horrible change. If you truly, truly get canceled like I did, like shredded, destroyed, reputation done. Some people like this Tubin guy, he can whip out his penis at work and then come back. But for me, as a tall, masculine, bearded, white male working in education, being labeled a Nazi and a white supremacist, that was it. That was it for me. And I'm happy. I'm happier now. I was having a lot of direct impact on people's lives, thousands of families and thousands of kids. But now I'm reaching millions of people. And so my ability to impact the world has actually increased. They've only made me stronger through cancellation. So it was, as many things are, both a crisis and an opportunity. And I chose to turn it around and turn it into an opportunity. And I'm still riding that same wave today.
Yeah, I mean, you've definitely, made lemonade out of this one. But yeah, as we know, not everyone's, it's hard to turn this into a career. I'm kind of trying to do that now. I have not been canceled. I'm pretty hard to cancel because I live at the periphery of a periphery somewhere in, the backwoods of wherever. So it's, yeah, I don't
Right.
know. Yeah, try me, guys. But,
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, like Kim Kardashian, part of her fame early on came from like a leaked sex tape, right? So like getting canceled is kind of like the new sex tape. And I could see how some people might even think about orchestrating it somehow, if that was your plan, if you had the foundation laid and your network built and the systems and funnels in places. But my recommendation to most people is that if your livelihood depends on the Leviathan, the Blue Church, the cathedral, if it depends on those people, you got to keep your mouth shut until you can change that. Disconnecting from the establishment, finding a way to earn money out there that's not a salary from a corporation that hates you and wants to brainwash you, or even just in the general mix of economic activity in the United States, at least. If you want to be a dissident with a voice, you better be financially, economically prepared. And so the first step to political sovereignty in the United States is definitely economic and financial sovereignty, or true liberty. It is that you have to have independent source of income from the system.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I and my husband have done. You know, we have kind of online businesses that are, you know, separate from anything. And I mean, yeah, podcasting is kind of one part of that. But you know, that's something I think people should learn how to do. And there are many ways to do this. Obviously, there's a lot of people trying to sell you pyramid schemes and stuff online. Don't click on the pulsating ads. That's not the way to do it. But there are ways to do it. And I feel like, you know, that could be a very good direction for people in our space to just develop into that, and just to explain to people how you can build, you know, affiliate income, or, you know, create, I don't know, websites, or do services. You know, you don't even have to do them under your own name. You can, you know, create stuff for
Yeah.
third parties.
You know, I never want to be a dream killer for people, but like, it's really hard. I mean, making money online, especially through some sort of brand, like personal brand, through your personality and just your thoughts and ideas, it's really hard. Most people don't make it, right? Most people don't make it. And I'm not lucky. I mean, I worked my ass off and I've been grinding at this since 20, you know, for years. But even before Twitter, like, I established my voice and like how to write and stuff years before that, even just posting thousands of times on forums and stuff, going back as far as, you know, 2008 or 2009. But it's hard, and most people don't actually break out, and it takes a real combination of luck and hard work and a unique life experience and actual depth of character and education and worldly experience. I think a lot of people get online and they see guys like myself or Cernovich or Jack Posobiec or others, I mean, having a very successful time at it and being themselves truly all along the way. But then kids in their 20s are like, oh, I can do that too. But dude, you don't have any world experience. You don't have any true depth. Sure, you can talk about this one niche, but like, you're going to talk about that for the rest of your life? You know, you have to have like a well of education and work and world experience and life experience in order to stand out. And then you have to have an event happen, and then there has to be a network that you've built, and so many things have to line up for it to be really successful, that I don't, you know, generally say, hey guys, quit your job and just, you know, oh, you got 500 Twitter followers, quit your job, go for it. No way, man. If you are going to make a transition like that, make sure that your side hustle becomes bigger than your main hustle before you make the switch, or at least that there's really, you know, potential for that. I worry when I see kids get excited and young guys get excited and they DM me and they ask me, how can I do what you're doing? I used to respond. I can't respond anymore to everybody, but I don't want to discourage people, but it is a grind. It is a grind. And who knows what would have happened to me had I not gotten canceled. I mean, I like to think that my content's good enough to stand on its own. It certainly is now. But like, this being discovered is one of the most difficult things. And so if you're going to do this, you got to figure out how to make it pop one day through your sex tape, or, you know, some amazing network that you've built out,
Yeah.
or become the news. You got to make the news. You have to be really proactive about it. I was just talking to my fiance now about, you know, all this and our life and stuff. And I'm excited because I've got Christopher Rufo and James Lindsay coming on together for a panel show, the three of us. I'm like, we can do this. And look, we're peers. Me, Rufo, and Lindsay. We're peers. We've been working at this together. We've been working on this stuff together. But why are we peers? Because I wanted to be. I just made it happen. So there's a semblance of like, you have to just really be super aggressive and just go and just pursue and pursue and pursue. And that's a rare skill set and circumstantial set and all these things that come together to produce success stories where there's, you know, a million failures, unfortunately. Not to be a downer.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a million failures in many industries. I mean, I used to kind of my main profession is in finance, and finance for startups. So yeah, I'm familiar with a million failures. It happens in complicated industries as well. I think that's, you
Definitely.
know, just as a pattern in life. But
Mm-hmm.
you make a really good point that, you know, you need some background. You need to kind of have lived, you need to kind of have, you know, a life experience to be able to have nuanced positions about what's going on. It's very hard to be a commentator if you're just like flying off the bench of your, I don't know, high school or university, or God forbid your university, because
Right.
that's, yeah.
Right. You know, I there was a lot, no names here, but there was a lot of guys that I sort of came up with who are just stuck. They're just in a cycle, in a rut. They just can only talk about the same thing, whether it's like relationships or like how to sell courses or whatever. They're just stuck. It's the only thing they have to talk about. There's no breadth. There's no depth. You really have to have a range. And luckily for me, I just had that education and stuff beforehand, and I'm able to pull on that. And I'm also just a lifelong learner too. Like my whole podcast, my whole show is just about me following my own curiosity. It's just about me just trying to learn. I just want to talk to experts. I want to read their books. I want to dig into it. I want to get dig into their arguments and learn along the way. And I've done about 75 shows now, all in. And it's been an incredible educational experience for me. Holy cow. Like what an honor it is to take like the latest book that's fascinating everybody, like say Christopher Caldwell, Age of Entitlement. Read the book, call a friend. Hey, do you think we can get Caldwell on the show? Boom, Caldwell's on the show, and I get to talk to him and interview him for an hour and ask all the questions that I want to ask. It's been exciting and rewarding, and it just feeds on itself. So being an autodidact and just continuously trying to learn is also an essential part of this, like this online commentating game, as it were.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's hard not to be addicted to it because that kind of fuels the machine. You know, there's a tension there that I feel it every day. I love this shit. This is my jam. I constantly am plugged into it, but I also want to, I'm going to be a mom soon, so I have to pace myself a little bit because it's my passion. It's been for a while, but it's also it kind of steals your soul a little bit.
No, it feeds mine, man. Feeds mine. It's joy for me. All this is joy. Everything I'm doing today is perfectly aligned with my values, my mission, my day-to-day activities, what I think is right for the world, like everything. I'm in perfect alignment. There's no soul stealing going on here. I'm as refreshed and energized as I've ever been in my entire life. And, I'm 45 and I finally figured it out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I feel confident in saying that now. Like I've definitely figured it out. It took me a long time, 3 kids, divorces, like failures at work, bankruptcies in the real estate game back in 2007 and 8. Just took a lot. And I think the lesson to take for younger guys or even older is like just failure is part of the game, bro. Like you got to get out there, you got to fail, you got to learn. And American success stories, if you go back, there's a lot of failures in everybody's story. So just keep grinding, y'all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 32 now, so I mean, not sure I could say I've lived this long and I've had as many failures, at least in terms of bankruptcy. No bankruptcy yet. I've had enough, and I feel like I've had enough scrapes to kind of get to that point. But I kind of echo your sentiment as well. Like I'm kind of in that phase where I'm so excited about this whole podcast thing because I've just started it like I don't know mid-January or something, and it's all amazing. But also the baby, so I'm kind of now trying to see, okay, priorities will have to switch, but at the moment I'm still definitely plugged into the game. But
those babies sleep a lot at the beginning, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I'm told. Let's just let it sleep and record a few episodes. I also wanted to ask you about kind of the pickup artist community, because there's a lot of kind of convergence from, I mean, you could call it the manosphere, men's rights. There's a lot of kind of forums that, there's a bit of overlap between them. Even MGTOW is kind of like at the periphery of that. There's a lot of people drifting into right-wing politics from that sphere. And it's been a really generative space, especially for ballsy men who didn't really care that much about, what other people thought about them, and came out and said what was on their mind, both about women and relationships, but also about apparently conservative politics, which, you could see that, like people like Cernovich kind of drifted into this space. But it doesn't look like it used to look. At least, I don't know. I'm a lurker. I've kind of been lurking around these forums for a long time. And it's, the old days of Roosh have been gone for a long time. So I'm curious, what's your feel about that community at the moment? Like what's going on there? Because I feel like it's all gone very hippie woo a little bit, or kind of maybe a little bit, I don't know, trad, or kind
Yeah.
of.
Well, man, there's a lot. There's a lot there. First of all, I'd say I am relatively disconnected from that community at this point. I don't do much content consumption as it is. I'm reading book after book after book, preparing for podcasts and such. But I don't really have much involvement in that community, whereas I definitely did. And I will certainly claim that that's how I got my start. I was very active on the Roosh forums back in the day, as were a lot of notable people names that you know today. The heyday was definitely like 2009 or 10. And, there's a reason why that space evolved into politics. It's because the same problems that befuddled bedroom and dating and the mating markets are also part of our national disease. And it's the attack on masculinity, the diminishment of male power, destruction of the family unit, the empowerment of the liberal single, white female as queen of the universe, subjecting our nation to their every whim and fancy, despite the fact that they're the most mentally ill population in America. We're being led around by crazy single white ladies, which is just facts. And there's that overlap because the solution to the dating and mating market is the same solution to the political sphere. We need men to stand the fuck up and just be men, right? Like that's the answer in both circumstances. Be the best version of yourself that you can be. Understand that masculinity and femininity are complementary and necessary equally, but complementary, different. They fit together to make a whole. And so if you accurately diagnose what's going on with dating and mating, it's the same accurate diagnosis of what's happening in the political system. And for me personally, I started pulling on this thread when I got divorced, 2008 or so. I just wanted to figure out how to date again. How old was I? Goodness, I don't remember. Like, late 30s or whatever, mid 30s. No, younger than that. And I didn't know what to do. I had been in a relationship for 10 years. So I went out looking. Somebody mentioned The Game. I was like, what's that? And I got the book and I read the whole book. And I was like, wait, what? There's a system behind this? Oh my God. And that was just the rabbit hole. But I've been pulling on that same thread all the way till today to talking to Alexander Dugin, right? Like, I'm just pulling on the same thread, asking the same questions. Why are male-female dynamics out of whack? Why are families out of whack? Why is fatherhood out of fashion? Just keep pulling on it. And here we are talking about geopolitics and like the deepest philosophical questions facing all of us. And it's been really fascinating to see how those fringe niche conversations, tinfoil hat conspiracy things that people thought we were all crazy is now really in the mainstream dialogue. It really is. I remember the Kavanaugh hearings and then the American Psychological Association around the same time condemning, masculinity basically is toxic. Those events to me were like, even when I finally just was like, okay, it's true, it's real. These issues are real. This is what's facing the country. The language of radical feminism rang out in the halls of the Senate Judiciary. And it was just undeniable at that point, and it's now seeping into the mainstream conversation where people are like, oh yeah, masculinity, it's an issue. Why aren't there more masculine men? And what's interesting about my audience now is that it's not, it's just a fraction of the old manosphere guys. A lot of them are still with me. A lot of them have blocked me also out of sheer envy and jealousy. I know this. And I'm now reaching just a much broader audience. And so I can talk about some of these issues that we discussed, on the forums and back in the day. I can talk about them now, and it's news. It's fresh to people. It's fresh. And they're like, yes, this makes sense. This helps explain this weird feeling that I'm having. So I do remember a few years ago, my friend Ivan told me, he's like, you're going to be the bridge between the dark corner niche manosphere and like general political space and the general public space. And I sort of disregarded him at that time, but that comment, but he's actually been right. And I just have a unique life experience, circumstances, and education capabilities, talents, maybe even, that has allowed me to actually make that transition. And Not that I'm after credentialing or anything, but I am doing the Claremont Fellowship this summer. And so in some ways, that's like the final stamp on this new persona, Jack Murphy, pseudonym, right? Not my real name, even though it is pretty much now. A whole new persona was created and established, and a reputation developed. And now I'm going to be a Claremont Fellow as Jack Murphy. So it's a really fascinating process of like unearthing all of the stuff and taking it into the mainstream, and now literally taking it into like a mainstream think tank, right? Like I'm going to be sitting there with Charlie Kirk and others at the fellowship, and I will certainly be dropping red pills every day there. And it cracks me up when I go on like Tim Pool and stuff, and in the comments they're like, oh, base Jack, base Jack, base Jack. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I suppose if this is the first time you've been hearing some of these things. To me, it's just the conversations that we've been having, you know, for 13 years now.
Yeah, it feels to me as well like there's a tension between kind of these fringe corners, because I mean I'm not a creature of the manosphere. Like I said, I'm a lurker. It's always just been fascinating to me to read stuff. I agree with a lot of it, and I feel like there's a lot of generative stuff coming out of those forums. Mm-hmm. I'm more apparently, at least lately, a creature of the kind of fringe right on the and on Twitter. I feel like I've been acting a little bit as a bridge for some of those conversations, which is quite spicy, and it's a bit. And there's also the tension that like, who am I? I'm someone coming in from the outside. I mean, I've been part of these conversations for a while, but how are you legit, and have you been anointed to be the person who takes the conversation to the mainstream?
No anointing necessary. You just do it. That's what I was saying before, right? Like James, Lindsay, and Chris and Rufo, we're friends. We talk, we collaborate on stuff. But like me visually putting us three together, that's me just making it happen. And I get to set the frame, and I get to tell my story, and I have taken charge of my narrative, right? That was the big lesson for me from the doxing, was tell your own story the way you want it to be told. And first you do it for yourself, right? Because the personal narrative you tell yourself that's running in your mind helps shape your actions, your behaviors, and in turn shapes the world around you. If you tell yourself you're going to do this, and you are this thing, and you're this kind of person, and you do it over and over and over again, eventually you become that person. Fake it till you make it is a real thing. It's a real thing. And I learned the power of narrative in the doxing circumstances in January 2018, when people were trying to tell a story about me that wasn't true. So what did I do? I went on the offensive and told my story my way over and over and over and over and over and over again. And now the thread that I have on my Twitter profile that tells the whole story, documented with all the blog posts and all the cross references and everything, has been seen damn near 3 million times now. And so I won that narrative battle, and I continue to win it, and I continue to shape my own narrative and take my life and my reality into my own hands. You can create reality through the stories you tell yourself and others. That was my big takeaway. So don't wait for anyone to anoint you. Do it.
Yeah, I think there's also, you kind of have to be that certain type of personality profile where, once they come for you, you kind of know who you are, and you don't let that first wave destabilize you. And because there's all, even now I'm sure there are people who think that you are an evil person, and they're in their own corner of Twitter or corner of the internet, who is just like quetching all day about how Jack Murphy's a Nazi or something. Yeah, that doesn't really matter that much to you, because you have your own essentially army of people that supports you in more ways than one, and it's fine. It's absolutely fine to be hated by some.
It is. If you're not hated, then you're not really saying anything interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah. I also wanted to congratulate you, because like you said, you have a fiance now. You're going to get married. You're going to.
We are.
A man of your word, of your man of honor. But I remember you mentioned on a podcast that you were kind of in an ethically non-monogamous relationship, and I'm curious kind of what the next step is. What type of marriage is this going to be? And have you repented your ways? Are you going to be a monogamous person, or what's your take on the future of your relationship?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I tend to think about these things in two different ways. There's one, like what works for me, and then there's what works for society, right? And in aggregate, I do not think that most people can handle or should even entertain, much less indulge in any sort of ethical non monogamy. Certainly not unethical non monogamy, right? That should be against for everybody, right? Honesty and openness is the essential part. And I just don't think that that's a viable long-term societal solution, right? So call me a hypocrite, maybe. I don't know. I just know what works for me. I can tell you that, well, the truth is that we've had a conversation, she and I, and we have decided that we're going to make that part of our relationship less public. And so we started off anonymous, totally anonymous. Jack Murphy is not my real name. Didn't use any pictures, nothing. So a lot of the early writings and early podcast stuff, it was much easier to be open personally about intimate details of your life. And it was also just a way to get noticed, right? As an anon with no reputation and no bio, no anything, there are different ways to get noticed. One of them is to be, like totally revealing. Just open up the robe and just show the whole world who you are. It's easy when you're anonymous. But now that I'm a public figure, not all of my life has to be public. I will say, though, that generally speaking, 99.99% of the time, we are, 100% traditional in a traditional sense of the word. I see it more as like a release valve. And I see it more as like it's a pitfall that people walk into in the future. They think that they're never going to be attracted to anybody else. They think that they're never going to have their head turned or want to have a random experience or whatever the case may be. And then it happens and they feel guilty and then they lie and then they get divorced and everything is screwed up. It's very, very normal for people to have sexual experiences. Humans aren't actually strictly monogamous. Strict monogamy means you have one mate for your whole life. Like, the math pretty much lines up and tells us, statistically speaking, that humans are not monogamous. We're serially monogamous. Even the most, even in the United States, what's the average number? It's like 6 or 7 sexual partners or something like that on average. That being said, we are making a commitment to each other in front of our family, in front of our community, and in front of God, with God, together, to create a union that we are committed to for the rest of our lives. What that form is, it's special and unique to us, but the commitment to the family unit, to being together, to being a partnership, to building a future together, to be productive together, to build a business and a life together, these are commitments that will be honored and cherished, of course. And I'll say this. I decided to marry her when the level of commitment that she was giving me was beyond what I would recommend for my own daughter without being married, right? Like, she quit her job to work with us and build a business together. She's been a loving stepmother to my children and our children, our family now for 7 years, 100% dedicated and loyal in every which way. Happily involved in our sort of traditional dynamics. I'm definitely the leader in the household. And she was willing to do everything. And I love her and I trust her and I believe in her and her demonstrated commitment to our relationship. I wanted to reciprocate that. And so we're getting married and I'm excited about it. And I can't wait for the future. And I can't wait to have the ceremony and to make our promises and to demonstrate to the community that this is something that we think is valuable and important, to demonstrate it to my children, that marriage and family is important and building a union and building a life together is important. And so in some ways I'm modeling for them. I'm modeling for myself. I'm rewarding her. I'm getting what I want. I'm modeling also for, the public, being a public figure. It's a weird kind of place to be. But it's the most natural and joyous thing in my life. I've got every day that goes by since the engagement, I'm just happier and happier about it and just more and more excited about it. And just feels good. It feels good. Like it's settled. right? It's like settled. The trial period is over. The my healing is done, from my old relationships, from my divorce, like I had to go through a process myself. I met her too soon is what happened, right? Like I met her too soon in my recovery process from failed relationships. And she was willing to, let me work that out. And I have, and here we are. And I couldn't be happier about it.
Yeah, yeah. You highlight an important thing about being, a public figure, because people do tend to want you to be their god. They see that you're a source of red pills, of baseness, or whatever whatever you want to call it, and they see you as a source of truth. And then that means, oh man, this guy's got his life, together. I shall emulate him, and every word that comes from his mouth is going to be my new law. And some stuff works because some stuff is generalizable, and some stuff probably won't work. Like you said, that there are some things that you've kind of worked out for yourself, and kind of you're doing this, you've negotiated this life for yourself with everyone around you and your community. And I think that's fair enough, because I mean, just looking back at my family, it wasn't necessarily the most traditional family, but there's a lot of cheating, a lot of not very ethical things happening, and it led to a lot of instability. It's a tough one. It's very hard to say, okay, yeah, I personally I would not engage into any sort of non-monogamy, but that's also kind of like, I'm at this stage, I'm recently married, this is my life now, I'm going to have children, being extremely trad. But I think it's still it's a nuanced discussion. But like you said, this is probably a very destabilizing type of lifestyle for most people, and that's a very tense area where it's kind of hard to to explain this to people, to say, okay, tread carefully, this is probably gonna nuke your life, because it typically does, unfortunately, for a lot of people.
Well, what is the element that nukes the relationship? In my mind, in these cases, it's the destruction of trust, right? Like deceit, lying, sneaking, cheating. Those things are very hard to come back from. Moments of jealousy, those things fade. That fades.
I think there's also the power imbalance that this sometimes betrays. Like, for example, if you're in a relationship, and there's always someone who's a bit more invested in the relationship, and that's typically the person who will concede whatever form of relationship the other person wants. You could say that this is already kind of a doomed relationship, because they're not on equal footing. But is any relationship completely on equal footing? So a lot of times it's someone in a kind of strong arming someone else into a format that they're like, I'll do it for you.
That's such a loaded way of saying things. The way that I always framed it for people was this: I have created a world. I love my world. I live in my world. I'm opening up this door and I'm inviting you to come into my world. You don't have to.
Yeah, that's a very sovereign and mature way of putting it. I'm sure this can be done, but as far as I know, I know a few relationships on this pattern that have exploded in many pieces, and it was, I think, maybe better to frame it as a strong arming situation.
Well, it brings up the question. It's a good question of, is it possible to live your life one way and give advice to people to live their lives a different way? And is that hypocrisy, or is that actually nuance, or is that self-awareness, or is it ignorance? It's a question that I have often grappled with. I think that we look at, like, say, our leaders, our rulers, and if the rulers are like, everybody do this, and then behind the closed doors they're doing the opposite deceitfully, well, that's whack. Right? Rules for me, for thee, but not for me. Right? So I've grappled with that. I know that like things that work for me personally aren't what I'm recommending. Like, very few people understand the amount of emotional maturity involved in being completely honest with somebody. Like, most people just aren't. They just aren't. And it comes from fear, I think, a lot. So you have to be extremely confident and you have to be strong. And it's there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. And I'd say our dating time, pre-marriage, because we haven't gotten married yet. We spent a lot of time working and talking and communicating and sharing and growing. And we were always just dedicated to emotional growth together. And that is a skill that you develop over time, and not everybody comes with that skill into their relationships. Some people never develop that skill. So I don't know. It's something that I often think about. And, who knows what the future is going to bring. But I know that right now, man, I'm just excited and she's excited. And wedding talk now, we were having wedding talk at the dinner table with my, all the kids were there. And I looked at my son and I said, "You ready for wedding talk for 15 months? He laughed. He's like, "No."
So you guys are going to have a big, a big shindig.
Big's probably not the right word, but we're going to have a wedding. That is for sure. And we've been shopping for our locations and such right now. And it's going to be fun. The whole point is to make a public proclamation, a public commitment, right? When you make a commitment in front of your community, you want to uphold it, and in front of your family, and you want to honor somebody in front of your family. The whole thing is about being public. We live together. We built the life together. She works with me. We have everything shared already, right? The change is going to be the public commitment in front of everyone. And that part's exciting.
Yeah, well, I am excited for you. I mean, that makes me a little bit jealous. I had to have like a kind of almost a shotgun COVID wedding. But yeah, I can't wait to, I think we're going to have a celebration in New Zealand with kind of an extended family situation eventually, but not anytime soon. But yeah, that's a good idea. I think you won't regret it. I also wanted to ask you about kind of libertarianism in your past as a kind of, you were a libertarian, weren't you? I think you went to George Mason.
I sure did. I was definitely trained up as a libertarian. And here's the funny part. I started off as a philosophy major, did the early stuff, did Plato and Republic and Rousseau and Locke and Hobbes and all that. And then we got to Marx. I took a whole semester on Marx. And I was reading it and I was like, man, economics sounds important. So I switched. I became an economics major, and I didn't know it really at the time what it meant, because I was like 20 years old, or 21. And, George Mason is an extremely libertarian economics and public policy school, which I learned what that meant while I was there. It was the first time I heard taxation is theft. That's for sure. And, so just as it is when you go to college and you're not super critical of everything and you've been told, you get taught, that definitely formed the foundation for my economic and political and public policy perspectives. Then later in life, I went to Georgetown School of Foreign Service. And I thought I was actually in a really democratic, liberal place there, which it is right now. But later in life, I actually realized that they were the same. The neoliberal consensus. It was the same. Libertarian free market ideology got fused into the Democratic Party. They became the Uniparty. Matt Stoller's done a lot of great writing on this in his book Goliath. And so despite the fact that it was allegedly like a right-wing place at George Mason and then allegedly a left-wing place at Georgetown, I later figured out it was exactly the same thing. Free markets at all costs, open borders, free travel for everybody, free trade, no tariffs, and free capital flows and currency flows. Doesn't matter, man. Everything will work itself out. There will be, what's the word? But, the invisible hand will, there'll be positive destruction. There's a better phrase.
Yeah, creative destruction.
Creative destruction, right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we saw them try to implement it and still implement it, and it's all corrupted and it's all not coming out the way that they thought it would be in the theories. And so, did I grow up as a small L libertarian? Sure. It was like, fuck you, leave me alone. Right. That was how I was as a kid. It's how I was as a teenager. rejected all authority, rejected my parental authority, although my dad didn't earn it, so he didn't deserve it. Rejected authority at school and the law and just everything. I was a total rebel. And so that sense of like, stay out of my business, government, that's something that is just part of my soul. That being said, the failures in the marketplace are causing problems now to the point where the government may be the only one that can solve the problem. The idea that government influence or involvement in the markets or socially is totally radioactive and off the table, that idea has died for me. I am less inclined to believe that the government should stay out of everything no matter what as a rule. And I'm more inclined to say, okay, in certain circumstances, maybe the government does need to step in. And, social media censorship is one of them. The lack of antitrust enforcement is another one. Libertarian ideas of free and open immigration, 1 billion Americans, whatever, these things, like these ideas. Funny, one of my professors at George Mason, Dr. Brian Kaplan, I remember he was a grad student still, didn't even have his PhD yet. I took law and economics with him. And it's been interesting to watch him grow. I don't like where he's landed. I have his cartoon children's book on, free and open borders for everybody everywhere. And, I just don't agree with that notion. I don't agree with the neoliberal consensus, open borders for capital, for trade, for people, for everything. We need to think about ourselves first, Americans first. It's a crazy radical notion, it seems like today, because it goes against the entire consensus. But that was what was appealing to me for Trump. Two things: Trump, masculine energy, and, just like tossing out the neoliberal consensus and like starting to think about how to be selective and how to foster parts of our economy. And then, of course, COVID comes and exposes all of our vulnerabilities, our national security risks from trade and bottlenecks, and the fact that we've got medicine and key supplies all made offshore. We basically offshored and outsourced small tool machinery building. We don't know how to make essential components to our weapon systems. Like, we have just sent away key parts of our economy in return for making rich people rich and poor people poor. That's stupid. It's libertarian, big L. I don't know. I don't know what the end game is. In fact, I have tuned them out at this point and so I don't really know where the thinking is, so I can't offer like a really substantive current critique, but I can just say from a fundamental level, that's where I have evolved from. I'm not talking about like heavy-handed government influence, socialism. No. I'm talking about like selective use of government power to sort of get the markets back in place. Right? I don't think, again, Matt Stoller, Goliath, everybody should read that book. I had him on my podcast. He's a democratic populist. He'll lay out the same critique. And I just don't see the free hand as solving our problems at this point, because there's really not actually a free hand. And it's all really been used, these ideas has been used by the uniparty to just enriching themselves in corporations. And so real libertarianism hasn't been tried, maybe is the comment that you might come back from that. But yeah, it's been an evolution a little bit, but generally speaking, though, don't fuck with me. It's still my basic political philosophy.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are moving to that direction, and I have a kind of a similar trajectory as well. I'm also an economics major and kind of have a master's from the Austrian School of Economics in actual Austria, and it's the same thing. I literally learned neoliberalism, whatever it is that we call it now, and I feel like, on paper, libertarianism is extremely compelling because it's a utilitarian way of looking at inputs, outputs. It has the best equations, I would say. But what it doesn't look like, it doesn't look at all, is the human substrate that actually builds these markets. Like social capital, things that family bonds. The idea that if you move abroad to get a better job, that's just you're gonna create surplus value and enrich the GDP. You can enrich GDP by creating a war. There's still, you can move those equations in different directions. Get pluses on one side and minuses on the other in many, many ways. But the ways that we've been trying to do it have literally eroded profoundly that social capital that that actually gives rise to economic growth in the long term, but is invisible to the equations, to the napkin calculations of the libertarians.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been my.
I agree with that, and that's a very good way of putting it. I mean, labor mobility is a central component to open market neoliberal consensus, and what that means is that they think that people will just get up and move to wherever the economic opportunities are, be they inside their own city, state, nation, or anywhere in the world. And guess what? It's a lie. Doesn't happen. Why? Because people like their communities. They like where they live. They like their families. They like to be close to the people that they love. They like tradition. They don't like change.
Yeah, and that's good.
Yes, no, that's great. It's great. And that's why it's so, as you said, it's dehumanizing. And it doesn't, not only does it not take into account human nature, it destroys the positive elements, some positive elements of human nature, right? Destroying community. Okay. Community is shown to make people happier, healthier, and wealthier. The opposite, if you destroy community, it makes them what? Sadder, sicker, and poorer. What are we seeing in the United States? Sadder, sicker, and poorer. Breakdown and destruction of community. No regard for community building. All it was a bunch of zeros, ones and zeros. Fancy theories. Open up the borders, open up the currency channels, open up trade, and people will just move to wherever the most money is. Guess what? People aren't necessarily interested in the most money.
Yeah. And in
Crazy,
a
right?
way, yeah, it's almost like, everything's collapsed into Marxism. Everything is pure materialism. And it's like, no, Marxism said, oh, this is the way that, most people get the best amount of resources. No, actually, no, we libertarians have a way to allocate resources that's much better. And the only thing that matters is how much money you have in your pocket. And everyone's just going to move into that direction. Yeah, there's much more to life than that. And I feel like, it's legitimate to reject these two theories on the simple grounds that they are very simplistic. They're very, monomaniacal about their focus on, the bottom line, which is super important as well. It is important, but it's not the only way to look at life.
GDP is not God. Like, I can't believe that we even have to say that, but chasing GDP growth, and not even per capita, right? Just gross growth in GDP has been the goal. That and making rich people richer without any concern for the human element. And then failing to understand that the human element is actually the foundation for all this economic success anyway, right? Why do you work hard and protect something? Well, because it's meaningful to you. Why is it meaningful to you? Well, probably because you're related to it or it's part of your community. If you don't have any meaning, if you're not embedded in a community, if you're not embedded in your own history and lineage and such, what is there, especially in a decreasingly religious and spiritual nation like the United States? Nobody has any meaning. That's one of the reasons why I'm getting married. Honestly, I wanted to commit to something bigger than myself, and I wanted to come together with somebody else to make something bigger and more important, because that is a spiritual act. Getting out of yourself, building something bigger, focusing on something that's not exactly you, partially you, maybe, but something that's not entirely you. That's a spiritual act. That gives you meaning, purpose. I think everybody's searching for meaning. People who don't have it, the lost folks, man, and that's a lot of people. And it's not by accident; it's by design that people don't have any meaning, right? So we need to find a way to bring meaning back into people's lives, and community is a great way to do it. Marriage is a great way to do it. I'm exploring religion again. It's been an interesting journey for me in that regard, but I see the value and I understand it. And meaning could change everything for the United States. When yet, postmodernism, whatever, no meaning. None.
Yeah, or make your own meaning. Go to the Swedish buffet of meaning and assemble your own identity stack
Identity stack. That's a good one.
create some local meaning, because there is no meaning, obviously. So you might as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's I feel you. I know. I've just gotten married recently myself, and kind of exploring religion after a long time being one of the most annoying atheists you can imagine. So yeah, it's a journey. I feel like a lot of people are doing that, but maybe that's also my echo chamber because I surround myself with a lot of people who are on a very similar journey.
But there's a reason why both Roosh and Victor Pride. Do you know who Victor Pride was? He wrote a very famous and successful blog called Bold and Determined. And it predated Mike's success. It predated mine, of course. And he was hardcore PUA community, evolved into self-improvement, as you do if you're being honest about PUA stuff, right? Because it really just comes down to being a better man. All pickup stuff is about faking being a better man until you become a better man, and then just living authentically as a better man. That's it in a nutshell, if you guys need to know. But both he and Roosh found orthodoxy, right? And they left everything behind. I get that. They went out searching for meaning through sex and dating and relationships, found it wanting, found it empty. Took Roosh a long time. He banned me from his comment section many years ago because I was like, bro, you're doing it wrong. and it took him time to figure it out. And Victor Pride had the same thing. So like an evolution on that, it's on the same path. It's just a search for meaning. And at that time for Roosh and Victor, they thought they were going to find meaning from sleeping around and dating a bunch of girls. And I can tell you from experience that does not bring any meaning to your life. I've done it. And what it does have positives. There's no question about it. There's some validation. There's some affirmation. It's confidence building, fun. I'm not taking that away from it. But there's no meaning. There can't be any meaning in it. And I was always looking for meaning too, which is I was bad at hookup culture because I would treat the women with respect and get to know them a little bit. And then they would freak out because they thought we were just hooking up. And then they're like falling in love with me. And then it was always a crisis. I was the worst at that because I was too kind and I wanted meaning, and now I've got my own path towards meaning. I found it with the Liminal Order. I found it with the community that I built with 600 guys every day. I work of service to them and we're all working together to get better and to improve our own families and communities. It's a beautiful thing. I'm very lucky that I have that in my life. And now we're getting married so that we can have more meaning in our life and more commitment. And I am definitely a man of the times, right? I'm a product of the times. My life and view and my experiences are part of the times, whether it's from going through the whole dating thing and to find, search for meaning and quest for that, or whether it's getting doxxed or being on social media or whatever it is. It's like somehow I've just become like, I am like an avatar of the zeitgeist. And I've channeled that energy. And that's why I think I have legs on this, because that's what I do. Right? I am myself. I discuss the current situation that has led me to be myself, and then I share this journey with people. So that actually will never tire. That will never get stale because life is always changing and we're always growing. Those guys we talked about earlier, just talking about the same shit every day, how to pick up a girl, how to do a neg, how to do whatever. It's like, come on, guys. Like, come on, grow. Not that you're listening to this. You already blocked me, pussies.
Yeah, I mean, Rouge seems to have taken a completely different tack. I mean, I have not read his recent book, but it seems like he's pivoted quite
Me
strongly.
neither.
Yeah, I feel like I might get my spiritual illumination from other sources. Just that's just my my personal. But it might be. It's kind of like Mary Magdalene. Maybe she is the actual best source for spiritual guidance. You mentioned hookup culture as well, and I mean, you said you're not the best because you were too kind. There's a lot of pitfalls, and I discuss hookup culture quite a lot because it's it seems to be a very inefficient equilibrium for people who actually want to have long-term relationships, or want to get married or things like that. And it's very much app driven at the moment. I'm not sure how it was when you were engaged in it, but it was quite strongly oriented towards the algorithms. That's kind of how you found someone. And there's a lot of issues with that. I wonder what your vibe is with hookup culture. Like,
I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I guess that I'm not good at it. Even if my intention was just to like have a few dates and have sex, I still couldn't just be like cold about it. And I still couldn't not ask questions and not be interested and not want to be kind. And that made problems. I'm an attractive guy, and I'm tall and I'm successful, and I'm kind. And so like that didn't make me a good hookup partner. Because inevitably they're like, wow, this guy's really nice and tall and successful. Why am I doing this? He's being nice to me.
The truth is that the girls don't really necessarily want to hook up. They want to stop the roundabout, but they also they go on dates, and they go on dates with a successful tall guy like you, and they're like, oh, okay, stop. Actually, no, that's not how it works.
Right. No, that's not how it works. And look, there are certain circumstances in people's lives in which like maybe a casual encounter could be helpful. Like a woman that just got divorced or whatever is not feeling good about herself. Maybe she goes out there and she gets a little validation from it, or same thing for a guy, or when you're exploring or getting to know yourself or just having fun, maybe. But at the end of the day, like if your goal is to seek meaning through this, it will fall short. And sex is so complicated and chemical and emotional that it brings meaning to it, whether there should be or not, a good meaning, bad meaning, right? It's powerful stuff. And we're currently on trend to go back in time and learn all of the lessons that caused us to think that societally enforced monogamy was a good idea. Right? We're devolving to the point where somebody someday in maybe 10 years is going to be like, maybe arranged marriages are what we should do.
They're already doing that. Yeah, some friends of mine, Justin Murphy and Default Friend, are doing arranged marriages, and a few people are talking about this already.
Yeah, I mean, it takes the notion of like, oh, I have to be in love with somebody to get married, takes that out of the equation, and it really presents it as a long-term, loving but productive relationship, right? There's a productive goal to it. The reason why people say society benefits from the family unit is because it's a productive unit, right? It's not a self-indulgent love unit. It's a productive building block of society. And we don't necessarily see it that way. It's like, you have to be my one, you have to be my everything, you have to be my soulmate. And then as you get older, women especially, the standards go down. I do remember very vividly Singles, a movie about the grunge scene and dating in Seattle in the 90s. And one of the main characters, this woman, she's like, I have this long list of all these things that I love, that I need in a man. And the last one was, and he says, bless you, after I sneeze. And by the end of the movie, her list has gotten whittled all the way down to, he says, bless you when I sneeze. And the last scene is like the guy saying bless you to her in the elevator or whatever. But that happens over time, right? Because people don't have the right frame of reference for it, and my fiance and soon to be wife, I call her my wife already, because in my mind, I've made a commitment. I've already made the commitment. I want her to be my wife. She's my wife. She's my wife, right? Like, I don't need a government document to tell me that. I don't need anyone else to tell me. She and I have already gone through the chemical infatuation phase. We've already gone through the, like, all we can do is just like have sex and cook and stay in for 9 months. Those are fun times, right? We've gone through all of that. And now we're actually literally on like, okay, how are we going to build this family entity, right? Economic, spiritual, with the children, everything. And that's the attitude that we're going into it with, already having been through crisis, right? She stuck with me through the whole doxing, stuck with me through being completely flat broke, being completely shunned and shamed from society. And let me tell you, getting doxing is really fucking hard on your soul, right? It's like hard on your spirit. I was not in a good place. And she stuck with me. And now she's here when everything's going good and, very successful and there's money and everything. She's still here too. So like, I know that we're committed to building something together and we're not confused by that chemical infatuation, which people will seek. They seek out and then they get disappointed when it goes away after 18 months. They're like, wait, we're not in love anymore. It's the process. But that's passionate love, this very quick high spike at the beginning, and then it fades very quickly. But what Jonathan Haidt calls companionate love, the chart for this is much slower with a much more gradual slope. But over time, the area under the curve is far greater than the area under the curve of passionate love. And companionate love takes time to build. And it takes trust and it takes experience and it takes wisdom in your relationship. But by the time you can build this thing, it turns out to be a far greater reward and return than consistently seeking out that passion spike at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like hookup culture does really fuel that search for the passion spike. Like I know a lot of my friends and girlfriends are kind of stuck in serial monogamy, chasing that high because they're like, okay, we're just not. I'm just not in love with him anymore, or something like that. And then they break up after 2 years, and I'm like, this is a sixth one.
Right.
You're 32 by now.
Right.
It's maybe it's you. Maybe it's not the fact that they're not the one or something. It's just there's a certain if there's a pattern to how you react to all of these relationships, there might be something biological at the bottom. And then if you want to have something longer term, you need to figure out how to wiggle your way either out of that, or how to make your peace with that, or just follow through that.
Well, it's a failure of society to pump into people's brains that you're going to be able to chase that spike of passion and that it should be there all the time. And this person should be your soulmate and your total source of electricity and spark and inspiration at all times. Definitely not. Pardon me for 1 second. I have been sick. I've canceled a number of appearances this week, but not this one.
Aww.
FYI.
Thank you for coming on. I mean, I've also canceled a few because I'm at the stage where I'm like really swollen.
Yeah.
But it's all good, and I'm happy we got to do this.
I'm surprised you haven't had to get up and pee yet.
It's actually surprising. I have no idea how he's positioned, but he's been kind of gentle on that particular region. So it's been good. It's been good. I also wanted to ask you about. I think It's kind of in the same vein, because you posted a story about I think a former friend or colleague who was like said that she was microaggressed by someone, a worker, and she had a weird reaction. And she's kind of from that generation of women who's around 30, 40 at the moment. And I get a lot of questions from women in that age category asking me like, what now? What should I do? What should they do? I don't know what answers to give them, because I can barely, negotiate with women in my own generation.
So you're asking me what advice do you give 40-year-old women who are unmarried and unattached at this point?
Yeah, exactly. Who maybe are now kind of toying with the fact that maybe they're previous orientation towards screeching feminism wasn't necessarily the best idea, but they're slowly morphing into reality.
I mean, that's tough. That Gen X basically, Gen X women were certainly told a whole boatload of lies, right? You can have it all. Take care of your career. There'll be a man waiting for you when you're 35. Kids will be waiting for you at 35. Fucking lies. It's not me that decided it, but basically 24-year-old women are hot to everybody all the time. And there's always a brand new 24-year-old woman out there. Sorry to say. And women have been told lies. They'll be beautiful forever. You'll be attractive forever. You get babies till you're 45, fucking IVF, whatever. Or that career will make you happier and give you meaning. Is a lie. So like the first thing is just acceptance. But that's tough, dude. I can't imagine being a 45-year-old woman today and being like, man, I have to accept the fact that I was lied to. And then I made bad decisions. Now what do I do? And the truth is if you're in your 40s and you're a woman, man, you better start lowering those standards real quick. Find a decent guy, probably older, probably 50 something, and get with him, and he'll be grateful. Maybe a second wife. You know, I don't know. It's dismal. It's dismal. There's always a fresh crop of girls to compete with. And that's never going to change. It's never going to change for women, unfortunately. And then for a guy like me, as I get older, my value gets higher. Like my available options sexually or for mating or marriage are greater now than they've ever been. And yet the pool of me is diminishing relative to the women. So I don't know. It's really hard. I mean, my advice to younger women is to really seek out and try to get your partner squared away in your mid-20s. You know, your career will be there afterwards. You can always go back to school. You can always do this. You can always work part-time. The kids will be in elementary school in freaking 5 years, and you'll be bored out of your mind anyway. You'll be wanting to work. It'll be fine. It's tough. And this is why arranged marriages seem to have worked. This is why when the church and everybody was like, hey, y'all should get married real quick. Why don't we hook you guys up? Boom, you're married. These were good things. These were good things. These weren't bad things. Replacing that with hookup culture and aging, childless, unmarried women, bad. I've said this before. It's going to take what I call a generation of crazy Aunt Margarets, right? The women who are in their 20s are going to have to see a generation of women in their 40s who are miserable and unhappy having followed the advice that they're being given. And they're going to just have to look up and be like, I don't want that. I'm going to do the opposite of whatever they're doing so that I can be happy. And I think we're beginning to reach that mass of crazy Aunt Margarets. It might take a little bit, but the next generation that's coming up, they're seeing the negative effects. And that I think will be the biggest lesson. You know, I don't want that for me. So there's going to be a lost generation of women. Feminism has created a lost generation of women. There's no question.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like these were the women kind of who were kind of in their mid-20s when, kind of hookup culture started for real, and they were like, okay, now you're empowered. Now it's time to seek your destiny. And because the thing is, if you go through hookup culture for a while, you realize that like you said, it's not very fulfilling. It doesn't really work out. And then you kind of you become your own backlash, and then you understand that okay, I need to seek out something else. But for a lot of these 20-something women, they were already on the crest of this wave when they figured it out, but they've already kind of passed the age where it was easy to backtrack. So they have a lot of cognitive dissonance about feminism in general, and they seem to be very entrenched. And I feel like these are the women who are like at the women's marches and the pussy hats, and they're all in now. They've put their eggs in this basket, and that's it. Because
pun intended there. All their
yeah.
eggs are in that basket. Oh, that's a good tweet in there. I'll figure that out eventually. There's a good tweet in there. I see when I was younger, when I was a child, I had a disrupted household full of crisis. My mom was a substance abuser and very emotionally immature and stunted from her own traumatic childhood, severely traumatic childhood. And she truly did the best that she could, I think, but she certainly had issues. My dad, crazy issues, still to this day, unresolved issues. They got divorced. They were never happy. They were fighting. I was abused. I was left all by myself. I started having sex at a very early age. I was very sexually active at an early age, in addition to committing crimes and vandalism and sneaking out and all these things, terrible things that everybody said was like, their fault. Why are you doing this? What's wrong with you? Now I see my kids, teenagers, high school, they have no interest in dating. None. It's bizarre to me. At their age, I was sexually active. At their age, they literally have no interest. None. No interest whatsoever. They're also effortlessly not criminals. Oh, amazing. What is the difference? The difference is that they grew up in a loving, despite the divorce, we provided a stable, loving circumstance for them where they feel safe and secure. They don't have any emotional needs that are going unmet. They're not lacking for a father figure. They're not lacking for a mother figure. And their behavior reflects that. They get good grades. They do what they're supposed to do. They're mature and responsible. They're not sexually active at 15 and 16. They're not seeking out something to save them or to fill a hole in their life or to be the daddy that they didn't have. And I wonder if we can have a whole generation of that again, right? All you got to do is love your kids, and they probably won't do a lot of stupid things. Just be there for them. The generation that I grew up in, my mom was an empowered woman, and second wave feminism and all these things. And so like the focus on raising a kid in a stable household and stuff like that just didn't seem to be there for me and for a lot of my friends. So maybe we're training the future of people to not even be interested in hookup culture, right? If you don't have a gaping hole in your life to fill, maybe you won't seek it out through such ephemeral and destructive ways.
Yeah, no, I like that point, and I hope you're right. Because people have been asking me like, okay, now you're having a boy, and what are you gonna teach him? How are you gonna lock him in a bunker and teach him your based ways? And I definitely won't be able to do that because the world outside is more interesting than mom or dad. So I think the only
Won't diminish that whatsoever. Your kids will learn so much from you. You've got no idea. They listen to every throwaway comment. They read your mind. They sense your emotions. They see your behaviors. They learn from you in such profound ways. Don't discount that whatsoever. In fact, please focus on that responsibility. It's huge. My son, man, he's so based just from listening to me. Sometimes I worry that I'm not giving him enough of the full picture. You know what I mean? Because they just observe and absorb even when you don't think they are. Even when they're sitting over there on their phone and you're talking to your wife, they're listening. They're listening. So you'll have more influence than you think. The outside world isn't really that interesting.
But not in. I feel like a lot of people want to kind of force it. Like the authoritarian parent who's just going to say not in my house and things like that. But I think like you can influence much more by just providing a stable, like you said, loving environment, just being a decent person, setting a good example. Having a logical order in our house. Like I know that, the baby is kind of my responsibility because it's a baby and I need to, take care of it in a very physical way. And, there's a lot of nurture and feeding and everything involved. And then once he's a little bit more independent, then my husband's going to step in and teach him, the ropes of being a man, which is a different thing. And
definitely, that's a really good point for young parents to realize is that the babies need their parents in different capacities at different times in their lives. At day one, man, all they need is their mom. Day one, and for a while, the mom needs the dad. The mom needs the dad for support for sure, but the baby doesn't need the dad. As they get older, they come to you. They need you more. I'm saying as a dad. So like the dynamics shift, and there's a time for care and comfort. And there's a time for risk taking and aggression. And that's why a marriage and a family is a beautiful thing. You're going to have both. You need in a family, you need dad to be like, hey, jump off that thing. And mom be like, no, don't do that. You're crazy. You need that because then you end up putting a mattress down on the ground and the kid jumps and yet they're safe. Okay. Like that's how it works. Cause men can be really stupid and aggressive and casually risky. And women are very comforting and looking for safety and care and concern. And if you just get one of those energies, you're going to be unbalanced. You got to get them both. That's why as a guy who like studies and discusses and promotes masculinity, I always make sure to say femininity is just as important and you need it and they're complementary. And without them both together, it's incomplete. Not masculinity is not better. You need both.
Yeah. And they do make kind of a complete whole together in the sense that, a lot of the problems that I've had a kind of similar situation growing up as you did, very, very boomery environment, it's just a clash of egos continuously, divorce, just grinding crises every day. And the thing was, it was about the two egos fighting each other. Sometimes they would work together and things would be fine, but it was always like, who's on top, who's winning this war today. And I feel like, I've deliberately not I've tried to, wean myself out of that mindset as much as I could, because in my marriage, at least, it really isn't about me. I've got my own little battles online and stuff. If I really want to spar with someone, I'm just gonna, go to whatever weird Groiper 77 or something, and we can spar it out there. But my family is, it's a very collaborative thing, and it's about more than myself. Obviously, we're going to go through crises. It's not going to be easy all the time, but I feel like it's a completely different way of looking at this one thing that we're doing together, rather than, okay, who's on top, who's winning the tug of war today. And yeah, that's just such a corrosive place to grow up. And I never thought I'd get to this point, because I never wanted to get married, because I was like, yeah, I'm not continuing the cycle of violence here. But it's I feel like this is a very generative way of setting up your life.
Marriage is full of compromise and sacrifices. Sometimes it's not. It's a beautiful thing. You can make it kind of what you want, and it really just takes leadership and commitment. Leadership, I think, from the man, commitment from the woman, a shared agenda, right? If she's not on board with you, dude, be more persuasive, right? But lead the way. Lead the way. There was an old writer, I don't know if you call him pickup or whatever, but he described a motto of like captain and first mate, right? Like the captain makes the final decision, but the good captain's always like, so first mate, what should we do here? What do you think? Take that information, process it, and then make a decision and lead. And then what's funny about my relationship, I'm definitely the leader. She wants it to be that way, right? She wants to submit to me. She wants me to be the dominant force. She wants me to be the leader. I want to be the leader. It's just our natural dispositions. But she ends up telling me what to do a whole lot, but through delegation, right? I'll be like, okay, we're going to have a party. We're going to have 50 people, make it happen. And she's like, okay, I can do that. And then she comes back. She's like, here's your list of things to do. I'm like, okay, perfect. Like, I don't mind. That's teamwork, man. We know which part is suitable for each other and who's good at what. And I lead the way. She's on board. Delegate authority. She comes back with another list of things to do. Is fine. This is not a honey-do list. This is me delegating and then being a servant leader, right? I'm sort of rambling now, but men, lead, but be a benevolent dictator, right? And be a servant leader, right? The servant leader's job is to state the mission, is to get everyone on board with the mission, and then figure out how to help each team member do their part in achieving the mission. You have to be there to serve. Servant leadership is a strong, effective model that really can inspire people, your wife, your kids, your coworkers, your employees, people around you. And it turns the traditional notion of leadership on its head, or at least misconceptions, which is that people are like, leaders, they dictate and they just tell people what to do. They lay out the big plan and then they go back in their office or whatever. No, man. No, you got to get down there in the nitty gritty and help each other and help everybody achieve the mission that you have set. And that's what I mean by like being a benevolent dictator in your relationship and being a leader.
Yeah, and the thing is, your wife probably wants that. She might not say that. Because the problem is, a lot of times women react to weakness in the man by taking kind of this dominant, nagging position, because they feel like, okay, no one's filling that gap, but they're doing it in a very resentful way. So you have this nagging shrew that you've kind of cultivated by being really passive. And I don't want to blame it on the men all the time, but there's some guys are just really like, oh, whatever you want, honey. And she literally doesn't want you to say that. She wants you to say, this is what we're having, and if you have some input, then we can discuss that. But
I believe women would rather do something that they're like blasé about if the man says we're doing this, than actually be the one that picks the thing, right? It's like just leadership. On your first date, don't ever be like, so where do you want to go?
No, no, it is a weird thing, like as liberal, empowered liberal individuals, rational automatons going our own way, saying that there is kind of this intrinsic hierarchy that's expected. But some people, you see it with paying. People are still kind of comfortable with that relatively. There's still kind of defaults to having the man pay, and there's
Oh,
opening doors, pulling up chairs, and stuff like that. That's kind of archaic, and it's kind of almost LARPing that hierarchy, but people still like to do that. But the thing is, all of that stuff, all of these little bits and pieces, they all still harken back to the fact that yes, this is the expected order,
dude,
and you should
I
probably
asked
just go all the way.
I asked her out. I set the time. I set the date. I set the location. I ordered the food. But here's the trick. You order the food, but how do you do it? You're sitting down at the table and you're like, so what do you think? What do you think? What do you think you're going to have? She's like, oh, I like the steak. I'm like, okay, great. And the waiter comes and you're like, she'll have the steak. And so will I, right? You can still order these. This is what I'm talking about in terms of like being a leader, but not like being a dictator, right? Ask her what she wants, and then just take the lead. It's so easy and natural, but yet it's been programmed and beaten out of everybody, except when it comes time to pay the check. You're right about
Yeah, that's the last one. Just maybe because it's very materialistic.
that. Yeah,
That's
right.
the last thing we've got. Yeah, so I know we're coming up on time a little bit now. I want to ask you the last question, the
All
question
right.
of the show. Do you have a subversive thinker, someone who's been influential on your thought? It could be a writer, it could be whatever, living or dead, that you think people should know about or read more of, or be inspired by. Could be PUA forum guys, anyone.
Wow, that's tough. I'm gonna punt on that one. Nobody's coming to mind, honestly. All the names that come to mind, they require caveats, and they're like part of my past, and I don't know. I think my advice is to read a diversity of sources, be deliberate in the information that you take in, purposefully try to come to the other side of your arguments and interests, and just generally be proactive. Like, you have to take responsibility for your own education and for your viewpoint. The last thing you want to be is somebody who an idea captured, right? I think it's Jordan Peterson that said that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. The last thing that you want to do is be that guy who just accepted a narrative or a story passively and then allows that to run their life. Being personally sovereign is about occupying your own brain space and being deliberate about what's there and what you believe. So do I have a very specific person? Probably not. The first name that comes to mind right now is Jordan Hall, who's been inspirational for me. I've done 4 podcasts with him. Go back to number 10 if you're interested. Jack Murphy Live number 10. He's a truly visionary thinker. I wouldn't call him a dissident or subversive, but he is, in the sense that he believes that we're in a really fucked up place, and he wants things to change by empowering people and people becoming the best versions of themselves, which today is subversive, right? Becoming the best version of yourself today is subversive because that means you're better than somebody else, and somebody else, that's no equality or equity or whatever. Yeah, I think Jordan Hall, that's the one name that comes to mind. But I've studied and read so much. It's hard for one thing to jump out. And I think that that's a product at the end of the day of synthesis, right? If I had just read one guy, and I'd be like, oh, you should read this dude, read Moldbug or whatever, read Curtis Yarvin. No, you can't. You got to read everybody. You got to read everybody and be very deliberate about it, and then synthesize it, and then come up with your own unique perspective. Don't rely on one other person, because that person doesn't know you and they don't know your circumstances, and they may not be right. They may not be right.
Yeah, exactly. Resist ideological capture. Any,
Definitely.
yeah. Also, even people you hear on this podcast. It was really lovely seeing you and getting to meet you finally.
Likewise.
Also, I want to point people towards the Jack Murphy live show. Please do listen to it. It's excellent. I'm a devotee, and also the Liminal Order for all you gentlemen out there who are looking for a Männerbund or a community that's going to be useful to you. So,
Thank you.
anything else that people should go see?
No, please do hit sub on the YouTube, check out the podcast. And if you're interested in masculinity, brotherhood, and sovereignty, these are the 3 core values of the Liminal Order, and you're a dude, come down, check it out, Liminal-Order. We've got 600 guys all around the world every day working to improve our personal sovereignty in a team with other masculine men. Community makes you happier, healthier, and wealthier, and it's happening to all of our guys. So come check it out.
Excellent. And you probably are a dude, because if I'm looking at my YouTube stats, yeah, that's my audience. But also to all of you ladies out there, thank you for tuning in. And it was lovely to see you.
Likewise. Thanks.